Hey guys, how's it going? So before I jump into my topic for my video this week, I'd like to make a quick correction to information I presented in my video last week on the confirmation of William Barr as Attorney General. I stated in my video last week that the Republicans could afford to lose 6 votes and still get William Barr confirmed as Attorney General. That was not technically correct. The difference between the Democratic seats in the House and the Republican seats in the House is 6. But if you understand basic mathematics, if the Republicans who did not vote for Barr voted against Barr, cast a vote against the confirmation, then there's actually only 3 votes that can be afforded to be lost in that vote. Okay, so with that correction on the record, let's get started with today's topic. Sticking with the theme of the United States Senate, today's topic is going to be on Senator Mitch McConnell, who is one of the senators from Kentucky and is also the Senate Majority Leader at the moment. I'm going to be talking about the situation in which Senator McConnell finds himself with regards to the president, with regards to the current shutdown that's happening in the United States, and with regards to the Russia investigation that's going on with Robert Mueller. I'm also going to do my best to present some theories as to explain Mr. McConnell's behavior on these issues, and I'm going to be using some of the most up-to-date polling information I could find based on what's happening in Kentucky right now. Okay, so first I want to talk about Mr. McConnell's reaction to the events going on with the government shutdown. As I've mentioned in previous videos, last November of 2018, the U.S. midterm elections were held and the Democrats took the House of Representatives. And one of the first things that the new House did in November was to pass legislation through the House to reopen the government. So any bills that the U.S. government puts through have to start in the House of Representatives, and then they move to the Senate. The Senate either amends them or passes them as they are, and then there's a process called reconciliation where the two bodies, the Senate and the House, get together and they come up with a final product. Nancy Pelosi, who is the Democratic Speaker of the House of Representatives, pushed through legislation that the Republicans in the Senate had already passed, and the reason she did that is because it would look politically bad for the Republicans in the Senate to vote against legislation that they've already passed just because the House of Representatives is a majority Democrats at the moment. As Majority Leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell is the only one, by virtue of tradition, that can bring legislation to the House floor for a vote. As of right now, he has declined to bring the legislation that the House passed to the floor of the Senate for the senators to vote on. He's claiming that he has not brought this legislation to the floor of the Senate for a vote because he doesn't believe that President Trump would sign it if it passed the Senate and passed the reconciliation process between the House and the Senate. The Senate had already passed this legislation on a previous vote, and when it went to President Trump for signature, which would then bring it into law and reopen the government, the president vetoed it. The reason this is strange on the part of Mitch McConnell is because the bill that the House passed has had massive support among the Republican members of the Senate when they passed it the last time. And therefore, there is an option in the Senate. If you can get a 2/3 majority to pass something in the Senate, it will override a presidential veto. For this reason, I think it's very strange that Mitch McConnell doesn't just hold a vote on this legislation, get his 2/3 majority on this legislation, which most people think it would get that many votes, and therefore the president wouldn't be able to veto it, and the government would be reopened in spite of the president. The other issue on which Mitch McConnell's reaction has been strange has been the protection of Robert Mueller, the special counsel who is investigating the Trump campaign possibility of collusion with Russia. When Robert Mueller was appointed as special counsel to investigate the Trump campaign connections with Russia, there were almost immediately calls for legislative protection of that investigation because everyone was afraid of something similar to the Saturday Night Massacre, which occurred in the Nixon era, in which the president began firing people at the Justice Department until an attorney general agreed to fire the individual who was investigating his presidency. Every time Senator McConnell would get a question from a reporter about whether or not he would introduce legislation to protect Robert Mueller's investigation, he has said that he would not do that because he didn't believe that President Trump would attempt to fire Mr. Mueller or interfere in the investigation. It's entirely possible that Senator McConnell has information that the general public does not as to why President Trump wouldn't interfere with the Mueller investigation, and he may be counting on the fact that in the event that President Trump interfered with the investigation, even Republican senators would eventually be in favor of impeaching the president on those grounds. I'm not sure. But I think there might be another reason which would explain both Mr. McConnell's position on the Mueller investigation and why he has been so hesitant to introduce legislation on the floor to end the government shutdown in the United States. And that is simply that President Trump is more popular in McConnell's home state of Kentucky than Senator McConnell is at this moment. And he's coming up for election in 2020, as are many other Republican senators. Senator McConnell is an extremely savvy politician, or has that reputation, so I suspect he understands that as of December of 2018, President Trump's approval rating in his home state of Kentucky was at 55%. While that has declined from 2017, where I believe it was in the 60s, that's still a factor to consider when making moves against the president that is that popular in your own state, especially when you consider that up until recently, Senator McConnell was one of the most disliked senators in the country. So I suspect that President Trump has leverage over Senator McConnell, and the safest thing politically for Senator McConnell to do, considering he's up for election in 2020, is to stay out of President Trump's way as much as possible and not give the president an excuse to try and target him in a primary challenge before 2020. Aside from protecting his own political career, there is another factor in play here for Mitch McConnell, I think, and that is that his seat is not the only Republican seat that might be in danger in 2020. So there's a possibility that he is factoring in the fact that if he goes against the president too aggressively in some of these issues, the Republicans may lose their majority in the Senate as well, and therefore they would have control over neither the House of Representatives or the Senate in 2020. And that would make things a lot more complicated. If you consider the fact that President Trump has nominated a ridiculous amount of conservative judges, and not just for the Supreme Court, but among all levels of the judiciary, Mitch McConnell is probably very happy with a lot of the legislative accomplishments that have been made under the president. So it may not be in his political interest to go too aggressively against the president at this point in time. Anyway, folks, that's all from me today. I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video. If you liked what you've heard, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'm trying my best to put out a video every Monday, so hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.